What would you do if you were treated like you didn't belong, only to find an unexpected ally who turns the tables? In this powerful story, Angela Harris faces blatant discrimination at her son's restaurant. When her son, Chris, steps in to confront the racist waitress, he not only defends his mother but also upholds the values of respect and integrity that define his business. Get ready for a story that challenges assumptions, reinforces the importance of accountability, and reminds us of the power of standing up for what's right. Subscribe to Mr. Denzel Stories for more impactful narratives like this. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Angela Harris stepped into the restaurant, her heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood floor. The upscale establishment exuded quiet sophistication. Soft lighting, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of conversation blended into a soothing ambience. Angela allowed herself a small smile as she took in the surroundings. This was her son Chris's pride and joy, a culmination of years of hard work and determination. Tonight, Angela had come to celebrate two milestones. It was both a personal achievement for her and a chance to honor her son's success. Chris had insisted she visit, promising to join her later for dessert after ensuring that everything in the kitchen and dining area was running smoothly. True to his nature, Chris rarely mentioned that he was the owner, preferring to observe the restaurant's operations anonymously. Angela admired his humility and dedication. "Table for one?" a cheerful hostess asked, her smile welcoming. "Yes, but I am meeting someone later," Angela replied. "I will start on my own." "Right this way," the hostess said, gesturing toward a table near the window. From there, the view of the city lights added to the restaurant's charm. Angela settled into her seat, smoothing her navy blue dress and glancing at the menu. A wave of pride swept over her as she imagined Chris working behind the scenes, ensuring that every detail met his high standards. Moments later, a waitress approached. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, with a sharp expression and stiff posture that stood out against the warm demeanor of the other staff members. "Water?" the waitress asked curtly, without making eye contact. "Yes, please," Angela said, offering a polite smile. The waitress returned with a glass, placing it on the table with an audible clunk. Angela hesitated for a moment, slightly put off by the abruptness, but chose not to jump to conclusions. "Thank you," Angela said warmly. The waitress said nothing and pulled out a notepad. "Ready to order?" she asked flatly. Angela nodded. "I will start with the house salad and then have the grilled salmon." The waitress scribbled the order down and turned away without a word. Angela watched her walk toward another table, where her demeanor changed completely. She greeted the diners with a bright smile and engaged in lively conversation. Angela shook her head slightly, dismissing the moment. She reminded herself that she was here to celebrate and chose to focus on the positives, but a faint unease lingered. As Angela sipped her water, she noted that her appetite and excitement had diminished. It had been nearly 20 minutes since her salad plate was cleared, yet there was no sign of her main course. She glanced at her phone, a small frown forming as her patience began to wear thin. Around her, the dining room hummed with activity. A young couple seated nearby, who had arrived long after her, were already being served their entrees. Their server placed the plates down with a flourish before refilling their glasses and chatting with them briefly. The scene contrasted sharply with Angela's own experience, and her stomach tightened. Angela turned her gaze toward the kitchen, hoping to see her waitress emerging with her plate. Instead, she spotted the waitress leaning casually against a counter, laughing with another table. Her relaxed posture and animated gestures made it clear that she was in no hurry to attend to Angela's table. After several more minutes, Angela raised her hand to catch the waitress's attention. The waitress hesitated, her expression showing clear annoyance, before finally approaching with a forced smile. "Yes?" she asked, her tone clipped. Angela kept her voice polite but firm. "I have been waiting for my entree for quite some time now. Could you please check on it?" The waitress shrugged, her expression indifferent. "The kitchen is busy. It will be out when it is ready." Angela tilted her head slightly, her patience wearing thin but her composure intact. "I understand the kitchen can be busy, but I have noticed that other tables, which arrived after me, have already been served." The waitress's lips curled into a thin smirk. Maybe they did not order something complicated like salmon. You know, that takes a while. Angela's gaze remained steady. I am fairly certain salmon does not take 30 minutes to prepare. I would appreciate it if you could follow up directly. With an exaggerated sigh, the waitress spun on her heel and walked off, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Angela watched her disappear toward the kitchen, frustration mounting. The interaction had left a sour taste in her mouth, overshadowing her initial excitement for the evening. Across the room, another server approached a table carrying a basket of warm bread. She chatted warmly with the diners, who laughed and thanked her. The contrast stung more than Angela wanted to admit. After several more minutes, the waitress returned, still without Angela's plate. Her expression was irritated, as though Angela's request had been an enormous inconvenience. Well? Angela asked calmly. Your food is still not ready, the waitress said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Like I said, salmon takes time. Angela leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but firm. As I mentioned, other tables that ordered after me have already been served. Can you explain why that is? The waitress's smirk faltered for a moment before she recovered. Maybe they did not sit here nitpicking every little thing, she snapped. I am doing my job. Angela took a steadying breath, her frustration mixing with disbelief. I think your job involves providing the same level of service to all your customers, she replied. If there is an issue with my order, I would appreciate some transparency rather than excuses. The waitress's eyes narrowed, and she let out a harsh laugh. Look, I will tell the kitchen you are upset, but it is not like that is going to speed things up. Maybe you should just relax. Angela stared at her for a long moment, carefully weighing her response. Perhaps you should consider how your tone and attitude reflect on this establishment, she said, her voice measured. I am here to enjoy my evening, not to engage in a back and forth over basic service. The waitress's cheeks flushed slightly, but she doubled down. Fine. I will check again, she said sharply before storming off. Angela watched her retreat, feeling a simmering anger that she had not expected. This was no longer just poor service. It was deliberate, targeted, and deeply disrespectful. She glanced around the restaurant, noting how other diners continued to enjoy attentive care that the waitress seemed determined to withhold from her. Angela took a deep breath, silently reminding herself why she was here. This restaurant was her son's pride and joy, a symbol of his hard work and perseverance. However, she could not ignore the growing disrespect she was experiencing. Finally, with an audible huff, the waitress approached. Her arms were crossed, and her tone dripped with impatience as she asked, What now? Angela straightened in her chair, meeting the waitress's gaze directly. I would like to know why it has taken nearly an hour for my entree, when tables that arrived long after me have already been served. The waitress let out a sharp laugh, loud enough to draw the attention of nearby diners. Maybe they don't make a fuss about every little thing, she replied, her smirk returning. Angela's voice remained calm, though her chest tightened. Asking for basic service is not making a fuss. The waitress's eyes narrowed, and her smirk widened into something more deliberate. You people always act like the world owes you something. Angela froze for a moment, her composure nearly slipping. Excuse me? You heard me, the waitress replied, her voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. Some of us work hard for what we have. Others just expect it to be handed to them. Angela felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she refused to let the waitress see her flinch. I am here to enjoy a meal, not to be judged by someone who cannot even do their job properly. The waitress scoffed. Right, because it's my fault you are unhappy with everything. Angela inhaled deeply, holding her composure like a tightly wound string. I would like to speak to the manager. The waitress laughed again, this time openly mocking. Of course you would. Let me guess, you're going to make this into some big issue. I've seen it before. People like you are always so quick to call for help when things don't go your way. Angela's jaw tightened. And what exactly do you mean by people like me? The waitress tilted her head, her smirk widening. You know exactly what I mean. Always complaining, always playing the victim. Honestly, if you don't like it here, Maybe you should go somewhere that's more your speed. Angela's hands tightened around the napkin in her lap. My speed, she repeated, her voice low and even. Is that how you treat all your customers, or just the ones you think do not belong here? The waitress shrugged. I treat everyone the same. Maybe you're just a little too sensitive. The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Nearby diners began to take notice of the escalating tension, a few heads turning toward Angela's table. Angela glanced around, feeling the weight of their stares, but she refused to let the moment intimidate her. Let me be clear, Angela said, her tone measured but icy. Your behavior tonight has been unprofessional, disrespectful, and blatantly discriminatory, and it will not be ignored. The waitress rolled her eyes. Oh, give me a break. It's not like I did anything wrong. You're just blowing this out of proportion because you're looking for something to be mad about. Angela sat up straighter in her chair, her voice rising just enough to command attention without shouting. I have been patient and polite, but you have gone out of your way to insult me, delay my service, and treat me as though I do not belong here. If you think I am going to sit back and accept that, you are mistaken. The waitress's expression shifted slightly, her confidence wavering as the room grew quieter. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. Oh, sure, make me the bad guy. That's what you people do best, right? Blame everyone else for your problems. Angela opened her mouth to respond, but a sharp voice cut through the air behind the waitress. What is going on here? Angela turned her head and felt a wave of relief as she saw her son, Chris, standing a few feet away. His sharp gaze was fixed on the waitress, his expression unreadable but tinged with quiet intensity. His presence commanded immediate attention, and the tension in the room shifted as diners turned their focus to him. The waitress spun around, her face paling slightly as she realized who had spoken. Nothing, she stammered. Just a misunderstanding. Chris's eyes flicked to Angela, who gave him a calm but pointed look, then back to the waitress. I'd like to hear it from the customer, he said, his voice firm and steady. Angela sat back in her chair, a small wave of relief washing over her. It seems the waitress forgot to put in my order, she said evenly. Then she decided to compensate for her mistake by making it personal. Chris's jaw tightened as he turned back to the waitress, who now looked visibly uncomfortable. We'll handle this in my office. Now, he said, gesturing firmly. The waitress hesitated but ultimately followed, her steps stiff and defensive. Angela stood and followed silently, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the waitress's defensive posture. Chris shut the office door behind them and leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his sharp gaze fixed on the waitress. Let's hear it, Chris said, his voice quiet but commanding. What happened out there? The waitress crossed her arms, her eyes darting to Angela before settling back on Chris. Look, this is just a misunderstanding, she began, her tone clipped. She got upset because her food was taking a while. I tried to explain, but she kept pushing, and things got heated. Angela tilted her head slightly, her tone steady. Pushing? Asking about an order that wasn't even submitted isn't pushing. It is called basic accountability. The waitress rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a smirk. See what I mean? She's impossible to please. I forgot to put the order in. It happens. But instead of being reasonable, she had to make a scene. Chris's voice grew sharper. Making a scene? You mean asking for the service she should have received in the first place? The waitress straightened, her cheeks reddening. I said it was a mistake. People forget things. It's not like I did it on purpose. Angela's calm tone cut through her excuses. But you didn't stop there. You mocked me, made sarcastic comments, and judged me instead of correcting your mistake. The waitress's composure faltered as she stammered. I wasn't judging you. You just kept acting like everything was my fault. Angela leaned forward slightly. If forgetting the order was a mistake, then your comments about people like me weren't. The waitress's face flushed. That wasn't. I didn't mean it like that. Chris's eyes narrowed. Then explain what you did mean. This isn't about one bad night, Chris said firmly, his tone cutting through the room's tension. I've had complaints about your attitude before, but I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Clearly, that was a mistake. Emily's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. This is ridiculous. You're blowing this out of proportion just because she's your mom. Chris stepped forward, his gaze sharp as steel. This isn't about her being my mother. It's about you treating someone with blatant disrespect and refusing to take responsibility for it. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but Chris raised a hand. Enough. Take a break. We're not done here. Emily huffed, her face red with anger, but she stormed out without another word, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed in the office, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Chris let out a heavy sigh and turned to Angela. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice tinged with frustration. "She's out of line, and I'll make sure this is addressed." Angela gave him a small smile, her tone calm but deliberate. "I trust you will, but this isn't just about me. It's about the culture you want to build here." Chris nodded grimly. "And that culture doesn't include people like her." As the sound of the slamming door faded, Chris stood still, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Angela remained seated, her calm presence contrasting with the tension radiating from her son. She watched him carefully, recognizing the weight of his frustration. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Chris said finally, his voice low but laced with anger. "She has no business talking to anyone like that, especially not here." Angela leaned forward slightly, her tone even. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But the question is, what are you going to do about it?" Chris exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm going to fire her. There's no question about that. After what I heard out there, she's done." Angela nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I think that's the right call. But is she going to walk out of here understanding why?" Chris's brow furrowed as he leaned against his desk. "That's the part I'm stuck on. If I fire her on the spot, she's just going to leave here thinking I overreacted because it's personal. She'll blame me, blame you, and walk away feeling like a victim." Angela tilted her head slightly. "So, what's the alternative?" Chris straightened, his expression hardening. "I want her to face what she's done first. I want her to understand exactly why her actions were unacceptable, not just to me, but to everyone here. If she's going to leave, she's going to leave knowing the damage she caused." Angela's lips curved into a small smile. "You want to teach her a lesson?" Chris nodded firmly. "Exactly. I'm going to call a staff meeting after the dinner rush. We're going to talk about what happened tonight, her behavior, her comments, everything. She's going to hear firsthand from me, and maybe even her coworkers, why this can't be tolerated." Angela raised an eyebrow. "That could get messy. Are you prepared for the fallout?" Chris met her gaze, his voice steady. "I am. If anyone has a problem with me standing up to this kind of behavior, they don't belong here either. I'd rather lose a few staff members than let this place become toxic." Angela leaned back, a note of approval in her expression. "It's a bold move, but if anyone can pull it off, it's you." Chris let out a small, humorless laugh. "You've always said I had a stubborn streak. Guess it's finally paying off." Angela smiled but grew serious again. "Make sure you're clear about your message, Chris. This isn't just about firing her. It's about making it clear to everyone that this behavior is unacceptable, no matter who it's directed at." Chris nodded. "That's exactly what I plan to do. This isn't about you being my mom. This is about the kind of restaurant I want to run. Everyone needs to see that there are consequences for this kind of behavior." Angela leaned forward, her tone deliberate. "And what about her? Do you think she's capable of understanding the impact of what she's done?" Chris's jaw tightened. "Honestly, I don't know. But she's going to hear it anyway. She doesn't get to walk out of here thinking this is just a personal vendetta. She needs to know that her words and actions hurt people." Angela nodded slowly. "Then make her see it. Call out her behavior. Make her face the reality of what she did, not just to me, but to this restaurant and the values it represents." Chris's eyes softened as he looked at his mother. "You've taught me a lot about standing up for what's right. I just hope I can live up to it." Angela reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You already have, Chris. And this is one more step toward making sure this place reflects everything you've worked so hard to build." Chris smiled faintly, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'll make it happen. She'll have to face the truth before she goes." Angela stood, smoothing the front of her dress. Good. And while you're at it, remind everyone else why this restaurant is different. Make it clear that this isn't just about me, it's about setting a standard. Chris nodded, his resolve solidifying. I'll call the meeting as soon as the rush is over. She'll have to explain herself in front of everyone, and then she's out. Angela gave him a proud smile. Good. That's how you lead, with accountability and clarity. Chris exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Now let me get you something to eat. You've had a long night, and I still owe you dinner. Angela chuckled softly, her laughter easing some of the tension in the room. I'll hold you to that. But don't think for a second that I'm done keeping an eye on you. Chris laughed, a genuine sound this time. I wouldn't expect anything less. All eyes turned to Angela as she stood, her voice calm but commanding. You cannot brush this off as stress or a bad day. You went out of your way to make me feel unwelcome, as though I didn't belong here. If you can't acknowledge that, then your apology is hollow. Emily's face burned as she looked away, avoiding Angela's gaze. I didn't mean it like that, she muttered again, her voice barely audible. Chris stepped forward, his tone firm but measured. Then what did you mean, Emily? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you made a lot of assumptions tonight, and those assumptions hurt someone. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her defensiveness crumbled under the weight of the stares from her co-workers. I didn't think it was a big deal, she began, her voice faltering. I guess I just assumed, Angela raised an eyebrow. You assumed I wouldn't matter? Emily's head snapped up, her face pale. No, I didn't mean that. But that's what your actions said, Angela interrupted, her voice sharp. Whether you admit it or not, that's how you treated me, like I didn't matter. That is the problem. Chris nodded, his expression resolute. And that's why you can't stay here. I've given you chances before, more than I probably should have. But this isn't just about me or my mother. It's about the values of this restaurant, and your actions tonight proved you don't share those values. Emily's face crumpled, her voice rising in desperation. You're firing me over this? Chris's tone softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. I'm letting you go because this isn't the first time your attitude has been a problem. Tonight was just the breaking point. I can't have someone on my team who doesn't respect the people we serve, or the people they work with. Emily looked around, her eyes darting nervously as though hoping for support from her co-workers. The silence was deafening. She turned back to Chris, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to get this far. And yet it did, Chris said simply. Now it's time to move forward. Emily's shoulders sagged as the reality of the situation sank in. She turned and walked toward the door without another word. The room remained silent until the door clicked shut behind her. Chris turned back to his staff, his expression resolute. Let this be a reminder of what we stand for: respect, integrity, and accountability. If we can't uphold those values, we don't deserve to call ourselves a team. Angela watched as the staff slowly nodded in agreement, a sense of unity beginning to settle over the group. Chris met her eyes, and she gave him a small, proud smile. The restaurant had mostly cleared out by the time Chris returned to Angela's table. The hum of conversation and clinking plates had been replaced with a peaceful quiet, broken only by faint music playing overhead. Angela sat near the window, finally enjoying the steaming plate of salmon and vegetables she had waited so long for. Chris slid into the seat across from her, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. How's the food? He asked, forcing a small smile. Angela placed her fork down carefully and met his gaze. Delicious, she said warmly. But more importantly, how are you? Chris sighed, leaning back in his chair. I'll be honest, I feel drained. That wasn't easy. Firing someone never is, even when it's the right thing to do. Angela nodded knowingly. It's never supposed to be easy, Chris. If it were, you wouldn't be doing it right. Chris chuckled faintly, running a hand through his hair. I just hope the team understands why I had to do it. They do, Angela replied, her tone thoughtful. I saw it in their faces during the meeting. They needed to hear you say those things about respect, accountability, and standing up for what's right. This wasn't just about Emily. It was about setting the tone for everyone. Chris leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. I hate that it had to get to this point, though. I can't help but wonder if I could have handled things differently earlier, before it escalated. Angela placed a comforting hand on his. You can't change the past, Chris. What matters is how you move forward. You didn't just fire her. You showed your team and everyone else that this place is about more than food. It's about values. Chris nodded slowly, his resolve strengthening. I guess I just worry about what kind of impression it left on the customers who saw it. Angela smiled softly. The customers who matter will see it for what it was, a moment of accountability. You didn't let it slide, and that speaks volumes about your character and this restaurant's integrity. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of the evening slowly lifting. Angela picked up her fork again, cutting into the perfectly cooked salmon. You know, she began, a hint of humor creeping into her voice, despite everything. This might be the best meal I've had in a long time. Chris laughed, the sound genuine and full of relief. Well, it better be. I made sure the chef knew it had to be perfect. Angela chuckled softly, but her tone grew serious again. You've built something special here, Chris. This restaurant isn't just a place to eat. It's a reflection of who you are. And tonight, you proved it's not just about serving food. It's about serving people. Chris leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. You're right. That's exactly why I opened this place. To create something meaningful. Angela set her fork down, her gaze steady. It's also a reminder that these battles aren't over. Emily is just one person, but the attitude she represents? They're everywhere. The only way to combat them is by staying vigilant. Chris nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. You're right. I can't let my guard down. This isn't just about protecting the restaurant's reputation. It's about protecting the people who come here. Angela's smile softened. Exactly. It's not just about calling out bad behavior. It's about encouraging the good. The way you handled tonight set a precedent, not just for your staff, but for everyone who walks through those doors. Chris tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. I just hope she takes something from it. I know she's gone, but I want her to walk away understanding why what she did was wrong. Angela paused, her voice calm but firm. You can't control whether she learns, Chris. That's on her. But you've done your part. You gave her the truth. The rest is up to her. Chris nodded again, his confidence renewed. You're right. And from here on out, I'll make sure this place stays true to the vision we've built. Angela raised her glass of water, her eyes gleaming with pride. To staying true to the vision. Chris smiled, lifting his own glass. To the vision. They clinked glasses, the sound light and hopeful against the quiet backdrop of the restaurant. The evening had been long and challenging, but it was a turning point, a reminder of the power of standing up for what was right. As Angela savored her meal, she glanced around the now empty dining room, her heart full of pride. Her son had faced a difficult test tonight, and he had passed it with integrity. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew Chris was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.